Hereby call this meeting to order of the Comox Valley Regions District Electoral Area Services Committee for Monday, November 23rd. Thank you for the people tuning in here on YouTube, and we don't have anybody in the gallery today, so I don't need to go through all the emergency measures or where the washrooms are. So I'm going to plow right into it. This is an extension of the meeting we had on Monday, which we ran out of time. We had so many things on our plate. So we're going to start right where we left off, and that is backyard chickens in the electoral area. There's a report here dated November 3rd, 2020 for regarding the possibility of reducing the minimum lot size for keeping backyard chickens for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second on receipt, and I believe we're going to turn it over to our acting CAO to introduce staff on this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm pleased to introduce Jody McLean. Jody is our rural planner, and he'll be introducing the staff report. So, Jody.
Thank you. Through the CEO to the chair and directors. The report you have here is in response to a request for more information on the minimum lot sizes as they relate to the keeping of chickens. So chickens, they can be kept on agricultural lots and on rural lots, but on residential zone lots, the zoning bylaw has required the lots to be at least 0.4 hectares or 1 acre. That was reviewed in the 2019 zoning bylaw update, and a more nuanced approach was taken that included the new use called domestic agricultural use, which allows for the keeping of backyard chickens on residential lots between 0.2 and 0.4 hectares, so between ½ acre and 1 acre. So these size lots, they predominantly occur in larger subdivisions or in smaller, more compact communities, such as like Royston or Union Bay. And this use is generally associated with some nuisance or health factors. So that domestic agricultural use also came with a list of conditions, and those are based on best practices and guideline recommendations. And these conditions, they addressed a few aspects like noise from roosters, separation, which is easier to achieve on larger lots, but on these smaller lots, that kind of thing needs to be specified and enforced, and also some minimum standards. But really, it's the care and maintenance that the residents provide, such as cleaning up or managing waste. Those are the things that are beyond zoning regulations to affect. Those mostly cause the nuisances. So the effect of the minimum lot size is that it prohibits that use in those higher density areas where there are smaller distances between houses and between people, and where odors and pests, they can be much more likely to affect the neighbors. So reducing or eliminating the minimum lot area condition, that is totally feasible. The chickens don't require much space, but it also comes with the likelihood of increased bylaw compliance files. The bylaw compliance department does receive a few complaints every year on chickens, as it is. And they do have recommendations if the board chooses to go in this direction regarding smaller flock sizes on smaller lots. So, Mr. Chair, this report is for information purposes. Staff's not recommending any changes at this time, but this is a new regulation, so we're going to chickens on smaller lots. So staff is interested in any feedback that is there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for staff? Director Hamir?
Thank you, and thanks to staff for presenting that. I would be interested in I think, just removing the space dedication or the minimum space, but obviously keeping the setbacks so that neighbors are protected from any kind of structures that are close to their lot lines. I see cities that are able to manage having chickens in residential areas that work pretty perfectly well. Victoria, Campbell River, closer to us. So with on the Food Policy Council, where I sit as the CVRD rep, it looks like both Courtney and Comox are going to be looking at addressing and changing their urban chicken bylaws. And it would be a shame that if it was actually easier to have chickens in the municipalities than it would be in the regional district. I do, however, I understand staff's concern around bylaw enforcement and noise complaints. So I wonder if there is a way for us to partner with an organization, either Lush Valley or the SPCA, that could provide some educational workshops for urban chicken folks, just so that everybody is going into this with eyes wide open around feeding needs, around cleaning to keep odors down and preventing vermin from, being attracted. I think that would be a win-win, just to reduce everybody's concerns over people not having the right information. And it might be something that our community partners could support us on. But I'd be, happy to hear what other directors have in response. So thanks.
Any comments on that?
Yeah, I can provide a comment or two on that. Yeah, in municipal areas, those kind of programs exist. Some municipalities, they integrate the keeping of chickens not only with their zoning bylaw, but also with their animal control bylaw. So the chickens are licensed, and you can have if you violate some of the conditions, you can have your chickens revoked and impounded. Those can also come with, some municipalities require applicants take courses on keeping chickens before they're allowed to keep them. So there's those opportunities, but this regional district, we don't have a animal control bylaw in that sense.
Thank you. And I do notice there is some regulations around it. Minimum distance 1.5 meters from the side of the lot, 4.5 from lot lines, none in the front yard, etc. So there is some regulations right now. My understanding is that James, correct me if I'm wrong, was it 0.4 hectare in the cities? So this is more, probably even more lenient than the city's bylaw, correct?
Yes, so currently Comox does not allow urban chickens at all, no matter the size. Courtney does, but on 0.4 hectares, like you said, and Cumberland, they allow urban chickens regardless of size. Yeah.
Okay, so it's within the parameters of other jurisdictions. Good. Okay. So, Director Arbor.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, constituent that brought that up in Royston, and I mean the RDN is doing. I thank staff because they point to a lot of the other jurisdictions that have walked down that path. The RDN, indeed, Cumberland right next to us. I mean, I'm generally in favor of eliminating that because, I mean, we're talking food security and also. I think it's good. It connects people to their food as well, a bit like our gardens do. And if it's well done, I also hear the concern around a little bit of perhaps bylaw compliance. But I agree with Dr. Amir and staff. There might be different ways that we address that problem through education or through integration with our animal control bylaw. So I'm just wondering, for staff, there was a couple of options listed. One was to wait until there was retain the existing regulation and contemplate lower minimum lot areas. And the second option was direct staff to include the proposal to lower or eliminate minimum lot areas for the keeping of chickens in the upcoming general amendments to the zoning bylaw. Can we just have a bit more detail on those two options and how staff perceives them? The pros and cons of each option.
John True.
Good, thank you. Through the chair to Director Arbor.
one of the options is to proceed with allowing staff to amend the zone bylaw. So that's just a process where, staff would review the bylaw again and take into consideration what the directors here have said. With that, we will have some type of public process. We will go through their APC and the 3 APC committees. Not really too sure we're going to do an open house because this is supposed to be this amendment is just some minor changes. But we can proceed with that. Through the budget, if the board does support it, I know that you guys haven't seen this yet, but my proposal is to put some money aside for public outreach, and this part here can be part of the public outreach to the general public about public education with chickens and how to ensure that there's no nuisance with that. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And well, I'm in favor of that path if my colleagues agree. So back to you, Chair.
So after receipt, you want to make that formal?
Sure.
Okay. Any more discussion on receipt? Call the question. All in favor? And that carries. And now, Director Harbour.
So I'll make the recommendation of what Tom said. Was it option 1 or 2?
I think that's 2.
I think that's 2. To direct staff to include the proposal to lower or eliminate minimum lot areas for the keeping of chickens in the upcoming general amendments to the zoning bylaw.
I'll second that.
Good.
And then I have a question.
So shows that we're not chicken on this issue. Amir.
Yeah, I was just going to ask staff what the timeline for that, the zoning bylaw amendments is.
Through the chair to Director Hamir, the delay was just because of the chicken background information. I just want to see what direction we want to do with this. The goal is that their staff report is already drafted. Their changes have been made. We just now have to include the chicken component with the staff report and the draft bylaw. We're hoping we can get something to you guys in the early new year.
Great, thank you.
And Director Harbour?
My wife's grandmother, who passed away, probably would not forgive me for not raising this. Is it chickens or what happens to ducks? Because she loved duck eggs and she always kept ducks.
Maybe
Is there
look at
precedent to
poultry?
run?
Jody, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so the bylaw as it's written only applies to chickens, not ducks or a fowl. Yeah.
Fair enough. I'll bring this back in a few years if need be. Thank you.
You can always egg us on. Okay, so that's a motion on the floor. We're good on that. I see no other speakers and I'll call a question. All in favor? And that carries. Thanks very much. Okay, number 2, request for animal control feasibility study, a report from October 22 regarding a request from the Hornby Island Resident and Ratepayers Association to work with the Denman Island Residents Ratepayers Association to undertake animal control bylaw. A report for receipt, please.
Move receipt.
Second.
Moving second on receipt. And over to acting CAO for introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Amanda Yazinski is here, and I think Amanda is presenting on this report and the next report as well. So we'll turn the mic over to Amanda, our manager of bylaw compliance.
Automatic today. Okay. Good afternoon through the chair. So this report. This report serves to advise the committee of a request from the Hornby Island Residents and Ratepayers Association, HERA, that the Comox Valley Regional District work with HERA and the Denman Island Residents Association, DERA, to undertake an animal control feasibility study for Hornby Island and Denman Island in 2021. The Comox Valley Regional District's Animal Control Service was established in 1981. with the service area covering areas B, C, and the Vancouver Island portion of Area A. Currently, there are no animal control services for Hornby or Denman Islands. At the March 9th Electoral Area Services Committee, a staff report was presented to advise the committee of the correspondence received from HERA to have the CVRD undertake an animal control feasibility study. The motion from that meeting was that Hornby Island Residents and Ratepayers Association and the Denman Island Residents and Ratepayers Association consider making a joint request that the Comox Valley Regional District undertake an animal control feasibility study for both Hornby and Denman Islands in 2021. That was shared back with HERA and DERA, communicated with them in writing, and they responded on September 24th of this year in writing that HERA advised that DERA had agreed that Denman Island should participate in their proposed animal control feasibility study. Conducting a joint study of a shared animal control service will provide options that would mutually benefit both Hornby and Denman Islands. Study costs would be budgeted at $12,000 and allocated at 50% to functions 155 and 154, being the Hornby Island and Denman Island feasibility study funds, respectively. This study would start in spring of 2021 and would involve bylaw and communication staff time with the assistance of a local consultant who would lead a public consultation process on both Denman and Hornby. The recommendations on this report are that a feasibility study be conducted to explore options and costs associated with animal control services on Denman Island and Hornby Island in 2021. And further that $12,000 be included in the proposed 2021-2025 financial plan to be funded by both the Hornby Island Feasibility Study Fund, Function 155, and the Denman Island Feasibility Study Fund, Function 154. I'm available to answer any questions on this one as well.
And over to Director Daniel Arbor.
Yeah, thanks for bringing this forward. I'm in principle agreeing with a plan to pursue this, but the last 2-3 months, especially in the context of the Rethink Comox Valley plan, I have to say that there's been a few extra costs coming forward especially on the Hornby side, and I would actually like to have a better understanding of the overall budget and proposed budget increases relating to the island as a whole before moving this forward. So what my question today would be, if we move this forward, obviously it still has to go through the whole budgeting process, et cetera. So I guess we would see this back in January or something like that in terms of the budget.
Through the chair, I'm not exactly sure on the timing of both these functions for their budget cycle. They're actually not my budgets, so I don't know. James, do you know if they go January or February?
Thanks. So these the feasibility study funds, I believe they're going to be presented in mid to late January, as part of the general administration and part of the financial planning kickoff, I believe. So certainly you'll have a chance to see those budgets when they're presented as part of the overall budget presentations, and then, but you may not see some of the other services relating to Hornby and Denman until later in the financial plan season. So it could be into February,
right,
before you see a full picture. I think this recommendation, if it's approved, it certainly gives the indication that's the way that the Electoral Area Services Committee is leaning. That said, Amanda, if a decision on this particular recommendation isn't made until into February or March, is that still adequate in terms of delivering on this work?
Sorry, we would have to adjust when we came back with the communication plan, but we would still be able to take on that work and the project and the study in 2020.
Right, because the budget would apply to the 2021, 2022 anyways, right? Okay, yeah, so, and maybe, so, I mean, it just happens to be on your item that this question comes up. So on the merit of it, I have no issue, but it's just a compounding factor where inside the Rethink Comox Valley across all our services, we're trying to keep the line down, and you know, the 0.5% increases that we're seeing across all services. And on Hornby, I'm getting indication that the collective of services as a whole may come quite a bit higher than that. And last spring, most of the calls that I received complaining about property taxes was from Hornby Island and Union Bay. So I would just want to make sure that I have that comprehensive picture. So maybe there could be further direction to staff to get back to, especially HIRA and HiSeek and the rest of that, so we have a better handle on what those projected increases is, and maybe by January or February we can bring this back, if that's okay.
So would it then be just deferred? The motion itself be deferred? 'Cause
Yeah,
it's just a
unless staff
feasibility
says-
study after all.
Yeah, unless the staff sees this as that they're going to do some work between now and then. If we hear that from staff that it'd be important to pass this recommendation, I can do so because it doesn't fully commit us, but at the same time, just giving that heads up.
And to be clear, they wouldn't be starting the service in
No, it wouldn't
2021.
exactly, but
So it's just-
once you start getting the wheels going, I think expectations in the community and all that gets set as well through the feasibility study. So sorry to take some time.
Any comments from Director Hamir?
No, I'll defer to Director Arbor on that. So whatever he thinks is the best.
I think it's, if I can, I think it's appropriate to defer this until into the budget season when you've got a more fulsome picture.
Yeah, okay.
And that way it doesn't raise any expectations unnecessarily. And there is still plenty of time then still to do the work in 21.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you for the advice. So
And we can call the deferral on receipt.
Yeah.
That's legit, so. Okay, so any seconder for the deferral?
Second.
Seconded on the deferral? Time and place would be at this committee, probably more like beginning of February, is that what we're looking at?
Yeah.
Okay. Then let the record note, all in favor? That carries. Number 3, restructuring of regulatory services report, November 9, 2020, regarding the method and required legislative process for the proposed restructuring of several existing regulatory services to streamline service delivery and achieve efficiencies, respecting governance, administration, and public communication for receipt.
Move receipt.
second.
Thank you. Over to staff.
Thank you. So through the chair, this report is on the restructuring of existing bylaw and regulatory services within the regional district and describes the required steps and legislative process for the proposed restructuring, being the noise, unsightly premises, animal control, and fireworks services. The Comox Valley Regional District's COVID-19 response and renewal report for the electoral area services identified restructuring of these services in order to streamline service delivery and achieve efficiencies in governance, administration, and public communications of these services. The proposed restructuring would result in a Denman Island and Hornby Island bylaw enforcement service and an electoral area A, Bain Sound portion, B and C bylaw enforcement service, and would not present any financial impact to residents. There are 5 existing regulatory services that are separate functions from one another and vary in service area. For electorals areas A, B, and C, the CVRD provides services for land use enforcement, which is our zoning, unsightly premises, noise control, animal control on the Vancouver Island portion only, and fireworks. There are no CVRD services for land use enforcement or animal control on Denman Island or Hornby Island. Staff are proposing to pursue the following 2 services: restructuring of existing bylaw services to form an electoral area A, which would be Bain Sound portion, B and C bylaw enforcement service, expand the purpose of the existing animal control service for these areas to include noise control, unsightly, and fireworks. So essentially expanding our existing animal control function and collapsing noise control and sightly and fireworks into that service. Land use administration and zoning services are to stay with planning for administration and still to be enforced through bylaw, but would not be included in this restructuring. The second service would be the restructuring of existing bylaw services to form a Denman Island and Hornby Island bylaw enforcement service. This would include expanding the purpose of the fireworks service to include noise control and unsightly premises. It would also include amending the boundary to encompass only Denman and Hornby Island. Inspector approval from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing will be required for the merger of the services and repeal of the redundant service establishment bylaws. The proposed changes do not present any tax impacts to local area residents and property owners. It is proposed that the participating area approval be achieved through director consent. Should this committee and board approve the recommendation in this report, the associated communications plan and bylaws will be brought forward for consideration in the first quarter of 2021. The financial benefits from combining existing bylaw services will include ease of administration of the bylaw service from a budget perspective, as well as accessibility to additional funds when required during legal action files. Any of the reserve funds within the existing bylaw service will have to be individually expended before that service can be repealed and encompassed into a new service. The reserve fund balances for each function are listed in the staff report. The recommendation from this report is that staff be directed to pursue the restructuring of regulatory services in the electoral areas, as outlined in the staff report dated November 9th, 2020, by bringing forward a communications plan to inform and engage residents and the necessary bylaws to merge and repeal the applicable service establishment bylaws.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the directors? Director Arbor.
Yes, I really like this and bring things together. Yeah, everything. I mean, that item's perfectly aligned with I think our thinking the last few months. I'm just wondering operationally. I think I dreamed that because sometimes I have regional district meeting dreams, but I thought we had a discussion around even linking the water, like that when people were going out for water. So it's, I mean, for those listening in or for those of us, the rural areas are vast. And so when we send an employee, especially to somewhere as far as Hornby, to be able to perform multiple tasks makes a ton of sense to me. But did I dream that up? I don't see a water reference in the report, but I thought we had some kind of discussion like that in the past.
I'll try. Through the chair, we have referenced bylaw enforcement in 2021 taking on water enforcement a few times now. So moving forward, we felt bylaw would be able to do, they're out and about anyway, they're patrolling, sometimes driving through municipalities. So to do water restrictions, bylaw is taking that on, just the water restriction portion moving forward. But that won't cover Denman and Hornby, but you did hear correct. We are taking that on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fine. So yeah, no, I like it also. Quite happy to see this move forward.
And of course, we have consolidated our different local water service areas, or in the process of, so we're consolidating them as well for efficiencies. Director Hamir?
All right, thank you, Chair. And thanks to Amanda for the report. I agree. I'm going to echo what Director Arbor just said about this really fits with our Rethink Comox Valley restructuring, and it sounds like some great efficiencies are going to be taking place. My only question was around the reserve funds for animal control specifically. There seems to be quite a lot there, and I'm just wondering how long it would take to deplete that before, and what, because the other noise and unsightly premise fireworks has either a zero or a much smaller reserve. So with the imbalance there, do you see some issues around just the budgeting?
Through the chair, to answer your question, Director Hamir, because we're using animal control and we're expanding the service for areas A, B, and C, for Vancouver Island portion only, that the actual reserve funds for the animal control function do not have to be reduced at all at this time. It will help assist keep our budget on track in years to come, but because that is going to stay as is and it's going to encompass the other services into it, the reserve fund for animal control, as large as it is, will not have to be reduced at this time. It will be unsightly premises and the noise reserves that will be have to reduce before we reconfigure those services, but not animal control.
Okay, thanks. That makes sense.
Okay, so seeing no further questions or comments and being on receipt, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? That carries. Somebody want to move the recommendation?
I'll move.
Moving second on the recommendation. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the recommendation. All in favor? That carries unanimously. Moving right along, Seal Bay Park Grant Application Report, November 3rd, regarding an update on the dollar amount sought in the submission to the Community Economic Recovery Infrastructure Program Grant application for receipt.
I'll second.
Moving second on receipt. And over to Acting CAO.
And Mr. Chair, this report is presented here for information only. If the directors have any questions, we'd be happy to take them. Doug DeMarzo is here, General Manager of Community Services, should you have any questions.
Okay, so we can't let Doug off scot-free. That's a joke. Any questions? Director Hamir?
Just because we got to ask a question. All right. Well, I mean, the dollar amount was much higher than initially anticipated. So I'm wondering how that might impact the other grant application. And I'm trying to think what that was. But I thought we had two going in for the Saratoga grant.
Well, we do have two, right?
We do have two, and the change to this project does not influence, I believe, the other grant or the potential or likelihood of receiving one or both grants. They're treated individually, I believe.
They're different streams.
Communities are able to submit two grants.
Yeah,
I understand, and so I don't believe that the numbers would impact the ability to receive grants in either case.
Okay.
Sure.
Thanks for clarifying.
Thank you very much. And Director Arbor wants to chime in.
Yeah. And I think, unless staff corrects me, I think individual jurisdictions can receive two grants, but they can apply for as many as they wish. I'm aware of 3 applications to the same pot of fund from Hornby alone from the nonprofit sector, which was also allowed to apply. So I don't think we can control the number of applications, but I think the ministry will look to limit to 2 grants maximum per community. But overall, I think it's good. I think it's been really nice to see all the investment in Seal Bay, and if this grant is successful, I think it'll be a benefit to everybody.
Of course, you want every grant to be successful. Okay, for receipt only. All those in favor on receipt? And that carries. Royston Water Local Service Area Water Supply Agreement.
Move receipt.
Moving second on receipt and over to Acting CAO for introductions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Chris LaRose, our Senior Manager of Water and Wastewater Services, is here to present on this item and the next item coming as well. So, Chris, and I think you can just...
Thank you, James. Wait, or
should carry on, I guess.
carry on? Okay. So the current agreement with the Village of Cumberland expires at the end of the year, and the new one that's attached to your agenda was developed with the village staff to take us forward another 3 years, with 2 automatic 1-year renewals. if, as long as both parties are keen for it to continue. So other than the change in the term and the subsequent renewals, the only significant change is the removing the ability for Cumberland to suggest another rate. So up to under the current agreement, they have the ability to, every year to, if supported by increasing costs on their end, to increase the rates. They've proposed to hold them steady at the existing volumetric rate of 81 cents per cubic meter. The timing of the 3+1+1 was chosen to align with the kind of the most aggressive or optimistic schedule for extension of water services south and regional water to Royston. Negotiations on that project are ongoing. And once those progress a little farther, we'll be in a better position to schedule the required consultation and assent with the Royston Water Local Service Area users. So roughly 50% of grants have been obtained for that line, and there's a current deadline of early 2024. So we do plan to reach out to program staff to better understand whether an extension can be granted. We assume that the answer is yes. But whether an extension can be granted if the decision point is extended beyond the end of 2021. So at this point, it's still possible that we could proceed within the current grant horizon, but we will be reaching out just to understand, confirm that an extension could be obtained. So that's all I had today, but happy to answer questions.
Director Arbor.
Yeah, thanks for the report. The 3+1+1 seems to make sense. Maybe I'll ask a question that I should probably ask in 3 years from now. But if this is 0.81, and I should know that from the water committee, but what would be the expected rate under a regional water service?
So right now our rate, we've reduced it to 80 cents cubic meter per, well, for each 21 and 22 per the COVID renewal plan. So it would have otherwise have gone up to 83 and then 85.
Yeah.
So under the COVID renewal plan, we're holding even at 80 until 24, at which point it'll jump up to the 96 cents a cubic meter that was previously planned. Yeah. So the 81 comparable now will be low at that future point.
That makes sense. I guess the only big differentiator is we may have some significant capital costs to incur.
Yes.
For the Royston future service.
Yes, yeah, there definitely will be borrowing associated with the conversion, both to cover the capital improvement cost charge and their share of the costs.
Then we'll get a report on that in the next 2 or 3 years, I guess, as we approach that. But that's good to think about. And otherwise, I'm quite happy. It seems like Cumberland still has water for us, so that's the good news. And I'm quite happy to be in support of moving this forward.
Thank you. Yeah, so we would definitely plan to bring forward a complete picture of the financial snapshot in advance of kind of getting your approval for the structure of a consultative process before that begins, hopefully sometime in 21.
Director Hemier, have any questions?
No questions for me.
Okay. Thanks very much. Therein lies the rub when it comes to holding the line on costs on the utilities and taxes, is that the day of reckoning does arrive at one point. So, right now it's totally appropriate to be doing what we're doing, but it's going to be a big surprise when the full bills come in. Okay, so nothing further on that. We are on receipt, so I'm going to call a question on receipt. Anybody opposed? Okay, so now we have the recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation.
Move the second on the recommendation. Good. Any further discussion on that? Call the question on the recommendation. All those in favor? And that carries. And water everywhere. Denman Island Water Local Service Area 2021 Water Service Agreement.
Move receipt.
Second.
Moving second on receipt, and I guess back over to Chris.
Thank you. Through the chair. So the conversion process and progress towards GLID compliance with the surface water treatment objectives is still on hold pending the outcome of the grant application that's under review. So that announcement for that fund is expected no later than the end of March, and possibly we could receive some early indication before that. In the meantime, the current water supply agreement is expiring at the end of this year, and we need to have something in place for 2021. And regardless of the outcome of the grant application, it's very likely that the existing configuration will continue at least to the end of 21. So the new agreement that's in front of you today would carry us forward until the end of next year, and it is essentially unchanged from the previous version. If supported, the rates will remain unchanged in 2021 at the $1,400 per property using water. That is, and operations for DILSA, or the Denman Island Water Local Service Area, will continue to be provided by the Graham Lake Improvement District. Any questions?
Questions from Director Armour?
Yes, I'm pretty sure that there'll be a lot of ecstatic people in the Graham Lake area if the grant is successful. But for now, I guess this is a wait and see and roll over. And I think that's the best option at this point. So let's move this forward for sure.
Great.
Director Hamir, any questions?
None from me.
So I know you skipped over it pretty quick, but what is the rate per annum for water through that system?
So there's a combination. So if, every property in the Denman Island Water Local Service Area pays $500, and then every property that also uses water pays an additional $900. So it's a flat rate, no meters. Yeah. So I think there's two properties that are only paying the 500, and then the other 21 are paying the full 1,400.
Just goes to show how very valuable water is. And we undervalue it every day here in this table quite often. So very good. So anything further on receipt? Seeing none, call the question on receipt. All in favor? That carries. And somebody please move the recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you.
Second.
And any discussion on the recommendation? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries. Thanks very much, Mr. LaRose. Okay, the singular alternate approval process 2021, the report for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
And James, you're going to speak on this yourself?
I am, thank you. Yeah, and we've just got a short PowerPoint presentation here. So coordinating electoral approval responses or electoral approval processes at a single point in time each year. It's proposed as part of the COVID-19 Finance Administration Response and Renewal. It is part of Rethink Comox Valley. And it considers the board's interests in keeping services affordable and streamlining processes. The coordinated approach promotes a more efficient use of resources and clear communication to the public. Next slide, Jake. And next slide. So any public engagement beyond the legally required advertising would have to be conducted between November and April, depending on the project complexity and public impacts. This timeline just very briefly identifies some of the milestones that the EASC and the Board of Directors would see. And next slide. For 2021, we have proposed 3 topics, and this is after some discussion with various departments and managers to identify topics that could be considered. Other projects could have been considered, but their timing didn't line up well with the singular AAP. Thinking in particular the Merville Fire AAP, which is currently out to referendum, or sorry, out to alternative approval process. And then other service changes, like we saw earlier today, the regulatory bylaw compliance changes that had been contemplated as an AAP potential, but it's more suitable for written consent from the directors, given the nature of those changes. So for the singular AAP process, we're proposing these 3 topics. Rural Cumberland Fire maximum requisition increase to ensure funds are available to support the costs associated with the construction of the new Cumberland Fire Hall and that service. That service is delivered in a contract relationship with the Village of Cumberland. And I should say for each of these 3 services, there is always the potential or opportunity to not proceed with these if the timing doesn't line up. So for example, if Village of Cumberland has not submitted their final numbers and we're not quite ready, we could still recommend that we not proceed with these options. But it was important to get these points on the table today and have the EASC consider this if you want to move forward with the singular AAP. In other years, it could be a discussion with the board too, depending on what the services are that are put forward. So the other 2 services being the electoral areas community hall service establishment, and that would result in 2 services, one for area A and a second service being the expansion of the Black Creek Community Hall service, and that would include parts of area B and C. The purpose of the new and expanded services would be to provide consistent and stable funding to community halls. And again, that's a point of discussion that the electoral area directors have had at previous meetings, and again, comes through the Rethink Comox Valley. The third bullet on here is the Saratoga Pest Management Service establishment, and that would be to provide mosquito control for nuisance mosquitoes in the Saratoga Beach area of Area C. I've got a bit more information on that particular bullet on the next slide, Jake. So recognizing that these services, in particular the community halls and the Saratoga Pest Management Service proposal, they're important changes for the CVRD to consider, for the public to consider, for the directors to be aware of. And so we would propose that a dedicated report come to your January meeting. And that would look at some of the long-term impacts, the benefits, the resources, ensure that, that there's full understanding on what these new services might mean. If we run through the AAP itself, then we'd be looking at potentially establishing a service in June. There then is a legal requirement to undertake, it's called an integrated pest management plan. And that requires some public input, some legal advertising to obtain that public input. That would be undertaken in the summer and fall of 2021. And that plan contemplates the application of a larvicide known as BTI. And that application could be done in the spring and summer of 2022. And then the last slide, I think. So with respect to the singular AAP process, we'd be looking for the director's interest in moving forward with that today and ratify it at tomorrow's board meeting. The AAP itself will be conducted in May and June of 2021, with then results being returned to the board at the end of June. And as noted in the report, we would be coming to the board with bylaw readings and the other required logistics in February to get those processes underway. So between Doug and Jake and myself, we are here to answer any questions if you have any, and entertain that discussion.
Director Hamir, you have a question?
I do, thank you. Thanks to staff. I really like the idea of a single AAP process. And James, you mentioned that primarily it's a timing issue for which services might go through this singular AAP. But I'm wondering if there's other criteria that come into play and whether or not that could be sort of a little bit more structured or widely known. Like, I'm sure, you know, the controversy, if there's a controversial service establishment that maybe not fit an AAP, or are there others that I'm not thinking of?
I think this would be our first year in proposing this singular AAP. And so we recognize that as we were putting forward the list of projects, that there would be some this year that certainly wouldn't fall in line with the timing because of other commitments around those projects. And certainly we did consider some of those projects that have a higher profile, whether it be because of public impact or finances. And there may be some rationale to hold those outside of a singular approach. I can appreciate the singular approach being clear for the public in terms of when the time can be for conducting AAPs. Our outreach and advertising can be consistent, so there's good information that we can present around that, rather than having individual approval processes at various times and potentially missing opportunities to engage with the public on those. So I think for the most part, we would certainly be proposing that those elector approval processes that can fall into the AAP do so. They would fall into the AAP. And as we move into subsequent years of this, should it be supported, then staff have a much more clear timeline and understanding of when to develop projects and processes. And this would, of course, tie into our financial plan process. And so I think you'd see a more streamlined and straightforward approach for staff, for yourselves as directors, and for the public.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Important to note as well that they're very area specific. The only one that is, I guess, the largest catchment area would be the community hall service establishment. So the other ones, especially the Saratoga Pest Management, we don't even know what the parameters would be for that service. It would be a very defined local area. I think Director Arbor wants to ask a few questions, and I have one to finish up.
Great. Yeah, just for my knowledge bank, and early in the presentation, there was a reference to written director consent as a method of electoral assent mean. What is the bar for that? Can it apply to small and large things, or because I haven't heard about it very often.
I get Jake to jump in here on the threshold. Service establishment requires 3 approvals. One is the board in its bylaw, of course. Another is the inspector of municipalities. And then thirdly, it is the voters or the electors. The elector approval can come in the way of 3 forms, and it's 4 forms, I suppose. Referendum, AAP, petition, or director written consent or municipal council consent. Those services that can qualify under the written or municipal council consent, Jake, is there a requirement or a limitation on that? Or is it more a case of when we submit a bylaw to the inspector is going to be looking for adequate public engagement and awareness? Should we be using the written consent?
Mr. Martin?
Thanks, James. Yeah, there are a few specific conditions. I can't reference all of them precisely off the top of my head right at the moment, but generally, again, as James has said, the inspector is going to be looking for certain levels of public engagement and approval on those most impactful, I think, to the taxpayers. But there are a number of conditions in which consent may be utilized, and the flip side of that may not be utilized.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to educate myself a little more on that one. Sounds like a dangerous one with bigger topics. So I'm glad to hear that there's some framework around it. And my second question, I guess, yeah, so it'll come back in January. I assume it includes all 4 halls in Area A, including fallen alders as well, or is it too early to say which halls would be looked at? Wait till January?
I think Doug's going to be able to speak to that one. Doug's been working more closely with this file and the community grants in general. Doug?
Mr. Marzo?
Yeah, our intention would be to provide that opportunity to all the 4 halls in Area A, and it's generally going to be in alignment with their current grant and aid funding, but there'll be some extras in there as well.
Yes, thank you. In this case, it's good to highlight that many of those halls already get some funding from the RD, so it would be just to formalize that and make it more predictable. So thank you. I'll be in favor of moving this forward. I guess the big giant in the room was talking when Dr. Amir raised the question is the garbage and recycling, which we're treating a little bit separately as an electoral assent process, but there's a lot of jurisdictions in North America, you know, it's ballot initiatives, right? And you get your either at election or otherwise where you get your long list of questions. But I think this takes us a little bit closer to that, so the public doesn't have to think about a topic 4 times in the year, but they can look at everything as a package and weigh in. Sounds good.
Speaking of the American ballot initiatives, Enid Slack, who is a speaker at the Municipal Financial Authority, who teaches at University of Toronto, was talking about that very thing. When you have something that is basically the right thing for your community, but they bring it up at election time, and generally it's turned down about 3 times before it finally goes through, and people realize that, yeah, we need that bridge across the river or whatever. The first time they go, oh, it's too expensive. Second time it's closer, but by the third time it's like, whatever it costs, we got to do it. And by that time it's costing double. My question is around the one I think might be on there, or could be a candidate be on there. Again, a very limited service area, but the Mount Washington Fire Service, because I know we're going to have to do a bump on that in order to get the money to do the fire hall and outfit the apparatus and whatever. So I'm just wondering if there's any reason why that didn't make this cut.
Staff is still reviewing the Mount Washington Fire Hall process, and last spring we outlined trying to look at an opportunity for public input that may be able to promote construction this summer. So with this AAP process proposed timelines, we're unable to meet the construction window this summer, and we'll be back to you with a proposed outline of possibility of maybe still meeting those original timelines in January.
Yeah, they do have a very small window up there to build. How many years has it been since the referendum? Has it been 5 years? I'm just wondering if we have the ability to do the 25% bump. So it's only 4 years, isn't it? So whether or not the 25% for a borrowing bylaw would be enough to. Because I would imagine it's going to be very similar to Royston, which is about $2 million. And we don't have the reserves that we have in Merville. I meant Merville, sorry. The other Royston.
Yeah, I think you're correct. We don't have the reserves, and I can't remember if the 25% will be adequate or not, but we'll present that in January to determine the best pathway forward is our hope.
Yeah, I just would like to see that move forward sooner than later, because we've had a couple of really close calls up there. And in the middle of the winter time, it's very difficult to fight fires, and it's very difficult in the summer to control them when they get into the wildfire interface phase, and they could just rip right through the whole community. So, okay, well, that answers my question. Thank you very much. We're on receipt on that one. Any further discussion on receipt? All in favor? And that carries. And the recommendation, if somebody wants to move it.
So moved. Second.
Move and second on the recommendation. Any discussion? On the recommendation, all those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. Royston Union Bay Sewer Extension Project. A commitment to work with Comox First Nation. Report for receipt.
The receipt.
Over to James.
Mr. Chair, Derry Monteith is here. She's our manager of liquid waste planning, and Derry will be presenting on this report.
Thank
Welcome.
you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Through the chair. So as this committee is aware, in February of this year, the Comox Valley Sewerage Commission supported a series of recommendations that allows for the conveyance of wastewater from Royston, Union Bay, and Comox First Nation Southlands into the Comox Valley Sewerage Service. And this opportunity to extend sewer servicing south is really the result of unprecedented cooperation, political determination, and partnership in the Comox Valley, and is a CVRD board strategic priority. The implementation of this project will help provide sustainable, ongoing environmental protection for Bain Sound by addressing cumulative impacts from poorly functioning septic systems in the area. and help work towards meaningful reconciliation with Comox First Nation by moving forward in partnership on a project that supports the KFN in meeting its social, environmental, and economic goals, and in building capacity towards independent government. This report presents a number of recommendations for the committee's consideration today. First is to reaffirm the CVRD's commitment to work with Comox First Nation towards the implementation of this important project, and to continue efforts to advance the project by exploring all opportunities for funding, including grants, loans, and partnership funds, continue lobbying efforts to impress upon the provincial and federal governments the importance of this project as a key community priority, and continue working with provincial government staff to advance the project towards implementation. It is further recommended that these commitments form the basis of a memorandum of understanding between the Comox Valley Regional District and the Comox First Nation. And with that, I welcome any questions you have on the report.
Very good. So we do have that grant application in that we should hear of by the end of the year. Is that the end? In other words, in another 6 weeks, we're going to get the yes or no on that?
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, preliminary, we're hoping to get a preliminary decision by the end of the year. So that would be the project moving through the provincial review process.
Thank you. Director Arbor?
Yes, thank you. It's nice to see this come forward. The Comox First Nation has been such thoughtful and forward-looking partners when it comes to the future of development in the South and in general, and in relation to their lands in particular. I think their intent and their values match almost perfectly with the regional district around trying to make this as a sustainable form as possible, and thinking through what is best for Bain Sound as well. So I'm hoping the board will support that. I imagine that this recommendation will need to find its way to the full board. I'm pretty sure the Switch Commission and others will be in favor. And beyond that, I'd even say, to me, a bit like the water agreement that was signed the prior term with the board, this lays the groundwork. The third piece to me eventually perhaps would be to look at once the treaty is settled and all that, to look at land use planning and integrated planning, even though we don't have to do it. I'll be looking forward to see how we can synergize the future of the area around Union Bay and Royston. So very happy to see this come forward. Thank you to staff for their work on it.
Director Hemier?
Yeah, thank you. I will just add that I echoed Director Arbor's comments that how historic this is, and just want to underline the commitment from the other electoral areas to making this possible. Even though this the sewer extension doesn't really impact Area B, having Area A enter this agreement and having everybody on side, I think, was a really important signal. So just want to affirm, and I'll be fully supporting the recommendation.
Thank you very much. I would like to reiterate that at one time, this project had the support of the UBCM's Green Municipal Fund to the tune of about $19 million. But unfortunately, with a failed referendum and the very strict criteria around the Green Municipal Funds, we had to give it back to UBCM, which is something I don't think we should ever do, somewhere or another. But the Green Municipal Fund in FCM, when I was serving on FCM the last year and a half, they had over $1 billion for initiatives like this, but it had to meet, as I say, very strict criteria around innovative technology and the latest in saving the environment. But this one is mostly just to work with the First Nations. They call it the Invest Canada Infrastructure Program of Environmental Quality. fund. So it's not as stringent in the criteria. Is that correct? It's what is the actual criteria on this grant outside of obviously the environment?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, you're talking about the investing in infrastructure? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so generally the criteria for that grant for wastewater specific projects are to improve the quality of wastewater entering the environment and generally meet the requirements of the federal wastewater systems effluent regulations.
So it's federal money distributed through the province with the help of UBCM?
It is a federal provincial funding program that is distributed to municipalities through the province.
Okay, so Ministry of Lands, Forests and Operations? What department?
Generally, provincial federal infrastructure programs are administered by the Transportation and Infrastructure, Ministry of Transportation. And Infrastructure.
Yeah, because I know that the Environment Ministry doesn't get any money.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. I think the regional district and Comox First Nations have made aware of both past and current new MLAs and others of the importance of this project. But I think this framework extends, the intent I think extends beyond this grant application. I think it really shows a long-term commitment to make this happen. We've also told or encouraged the province and the feds to understand that this is probably, the timing could be better and that this the stars are really aligned for this project. So hopefully we get some good news before Christmas. But if that is not the case, I like that we have this framework to say that we'll keep plugging away at it.
That's true. It is about the partnership here for sure. But of course, being a little bit of a skeptic, I'm thinking that that pantry is going to be pretty empty after this pandemic with the government funding. I think they're projected to all in all run about $1.2 trillion in the hole. That's a long way back. Dig out of that one. Okay, any more discussion on receipt? Call the question on receipt. All in favor? That carries. And somebody move the recommendation, please.
So move.
Second.
Moving second on the recommendation. Seeing no hands, I'll call the question on that. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Number 9, 2020-2024 Financial Plan Emergency Program Service Function 271. Budget amendment. And over to staff introductions.
Thank you. And Howie Siemens, our Comox Valley Emergency Program Coordinator, is here to provide us an overview of this report. Howie.
Great, thank you, James. Through the chair, I'm in front of you today just to look for a budget amendment for 271. It was based on due to the historical flood risks identified with both the Strathcona Regional District in Electoral Area D and the Comox Valley Regional District Electoral Area C near the Oyster River. Emergency Management BC approached us with those risks in mind and asked if we wanted to stage their provincial sandbag filler resource in this area. We accepted gracefully for that, and we positioned the sandbag machine in a local contractor nearby for convenience. In September of this year, EMBC contacted us, both this SRD and the CVRD emergency programs, to inform us that to allow this resource to remain staged in this area for response, it would need to relocate to the local government-owned land or controlled lands prior to the end of the year and be in a secure and sheltered enclosure. So realizing the value of this resource, both the emergency programs worked collaboratively to achieve the requirements of EMBC. A number of locations were looked at, storage options were explored, and determined the best and most fiscal responsible solution was decided to go with a C-can container for the sandbag filler to be stored at the Oyster River Fire Hall, which is CVRD lands. This location was best served for both regional districts for quick response to be able to deploy the sandbag machine, which is the agreement that we have under the EMBC to activate that resource. It will also become a storage for our inventory of sandbags for this area of both those regions. The SRD's emergency program has agreed to contribute 50% of the overall cost from the purchase and installation of the CCAN container, with the CDRP providing remaining 50% from the reserves in 271. The total cost of this project, with invoices still to come in, should not exceed $8,000. So basically, the recommendations that we're in front of here today for is that the 2020-2024 financial plan and capital expenditure programs for electoral areas emergency program service function 271 be amended by increasing capital expenditures in 2020 by $8,000 to accommodate the purchase and installation of the CCAN container to be located at the Oyster River Fire Hall. And further, that the purchase and installation costs be funded by the transfer of 50% from the future expenditure reserves from the service, which remains 50%, with the remaining 50% by way of contribution from the Strathcona Regional District as per the contribution agreement. I will take any questions.
Thank you very much. Director Arbor?
Yeah, thanks. I'm surprised Brenda Lee's not here today. Usually she's here whenever there's a Strathcona item. So, well, if you may indulge, I'm always keen for an education. So obviously this plan sounds really good, sounds very fiscally responsible, everything you said. So I have no plans and no problem supporting it, but I would love an understanding. So the machine lives in the CCAN. Do you have a pile of sand beside the CCAN, or does the machine get deployed elsewhere, or do you bring sand if you need more sand? And second, do aqua dams like Courtney uses, do they figure in those scenarios at all, or are we just looking at sandbags?
Oh, okay, through the chair. So the sandbag machine does get deployed. It is an emergency management BC resources. So it last year got pulled off and went up to the interior to support their flooding concerns. And they, before the process of bringing that back from the freshettes up there, this is where we started getting into negotiations. We found the CCAN to be an easy way to secure it. Also for potential for transporting it is all in one piece with skids of sandbags within that as well. EMBC has promised us that through that agreement that they would replace any of the sandbags of the skids that we send off with the machine. The other part to your question is that anytime we have any major flooding, we can work with Emergency Management BC and get different resources other than sandbags, but we are focused with sandbags for the public. That's mainly the main purpose for those bags be located at the Oyster River.
Thanks so much. That rounds up my knowledge.
Okay, good.
Director Muir?
Not really a question, but just congratulations to staff for reaching out with and working with the Strathcona Regional District. I love to see that cost sharing and hope. And I know it will benefit both regional districts on each side of the Oyster River. So thanks for putting this together.
Thank you.
And Director Arbor?
Since Director Muir said that, so before we move the recommendation, do we have indication that SRD is going to be in favor? And if they weren't, would we have to cover the full amount?
So right now, yeah, through an email process that's already the emergency program coordinator or the protective services coordinator has taken forward to his board. They have already agreed through an email that they support the initiative. They didn't choose to take it to a board because it wasn't really impacting any budgets to them.
Very good. And for those that don't know, the Oyster River is not a controlled river in any way, shape, or form. Although the headwaters is Pearl Lake, it's mostly runoff that comes in from tributaries, and it's very unpredictable. If you actually look at the maps of where the river is supposed to be, the river is very seldom there. It keeps moving its channel consistently. So I think it's something we want to jump on as much as possible. I can almost see it in my mind's eye right there at the fire halls, ready to rock. So thank you very much, Howie, for all your work on that.
Great. Well, so working with Sean Koopman and the SRD as well was a great combined effort.
So yeah, further to that, I imagine that Director Lee is in the loop on this as well.
Yeah, he's already had taken it to his board for conversation, and that was what the direction came back was that they weren't full support.
Great. So let's vote on receipt. All in favor on receipt? That carries. And the recommendation?
Moved.
Moved and seconded on the recommendation. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, call the question on the recommendation. All those in favor? That's also unanimous. Very good. So that brings us pretty much to the end of our agenda for today. I'd like to thank everybody for surprisingly turning up and zooming in. I think we'll be doing a lot more zooming in the days to come. James, you wanted to say something?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Only to say that the recommendations from today's meeting will be on tomorrow afternoon's board agenda.
I noticed that.
Quick turnaround. So thank you for your indulgence and attention to this meeting.
Seconded. On termination. All those in favor? And that carries. We are terminated. Thank you very much.